You're a loser, you're a coward, you're a nobody, you're an animal.
You know, I was that daughter at home, waiting for my mom to come home.
God have mercy on your pathetic soul, because the rest of us who know the truth about you won't.
In the soggy, rain-drenched landscape of the Pacific Northwest, a monstrous shadow loomed over the state of Washington for 2 agonizing decades. While the media obsessed over charismatic, theatrical monsters like Ted Bundy, a completely different kind of predator was quietly operating in the dense brush along the Green River. He wasn't a charming intellectual or a brilliant criminal mastermind. He was a plain, soft-spoken truck painter who blended perfectly into the gray, blue-collar backdrop of suburbia.
A survivor of child sex abuse, and there but for the grace of God were I, and so I could certainly empathize with them, and I also wanted to help them.
Yet beneath this painfully boring exterior hid the most prolific, relentless serial killer in American history. For 20 years, he turned the dark woods and muddy riverbanks into his private graveyard, hunting with a cold, repetitive regularity that completely baffled the task forces hunting him. Today, we are descending into the damp, terrifying mist of King County to uncover how Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, managed to steal dozens of lives right under the nose of the FBI, the camouflage of the ordinary. To understand how Gary Ridgway slipped through the fingers of justice for 20 years, you have to look at the terrifying armor of his total mediocrity. Ridgway didn't look like a monster hiding in the shadows. He looked like your neighbor, your coworker, or the quiet guy buying coffee ahead of you in line.
This was only the beginning of a reign of terror, and we wouldn't know who was doing this for a very long time.
He held a steady job at the Kenworth Truck Factory for over 30 years, never missing a shift and rarely causing trouble. He was a father, a churchgoer who openly wept during sermons, and a man who regularly hosted neighborhood barbecues. This crushing, mundane normalcy was his ultimate camouflage. The police were searching for a hyper-intelligent, calculated phantom, completely failing to realize that the ultimate evil was wearing a stained work uniform and driving a mundane pickup truck through the morning commute. The Green River Hunting Grounds. The Pacific Northwest is famous for its breathtaking, dense forests and endless rainfall. But in the early 1980s, that beautiful scenery became a labyrinth of pure horror. Ridgway chose the desolate, overgrown banks of the Green River as his primary dumping ground. The thick, tangled undergrowth and constant dampness provided the perfect, grim incubator to hide his horrific handiwork. He would cruise the neon-lit stretches of Pacific Highway South, targeting vulnerable women who had slipped through the cracks of society, runaways, sex workers, and transient souls whose sudden disappearances sadly went unnoticed for weeks or months. By the time the skeletal remains were accidentally discovered rotting in the mud, the heavy rains had completely washed away any microscopic trace evidence, leaving investigators with nothing but cold bones and empty questions. The psychology of necro-hunting. What truly separates Gary Ridgway from other predators is the sickening, repetitive ritual he performed long after his victims took their final breaths. He was not a killer who simply dumped a body and fled the scene in panic. Instead, he treated his remote dumping sites as private, macabre sanctuaries. Ridgway would routinely return to the decomposing remains days, weeks, or even months later, navigating the pitch-black woods with an eerie, perfect memory of where each person lay.
18-year-old girl laying on her stomach, a large bruise on her buttocks, ligature around her neck, laying face down, and, we just started doing our job.
In these hidden clearings, completely isolated from the civilized world, he would indulge his darkest, most unfathomable psychological impulses. This deep, compulsive attachment to his clusters of victims meant he was constantly returning to the literal scenes of his crimes, playing a high-stakes, invisible game of chicken with the law, the blind spots of the task force. As the body count along the Green River began to skyrocket into dozens, the state of Washington launched one of the largest, most expensive task forces in criminal history. But the investigation was crippled from the absolute start by systemic blind spots and institutional arrogance. Because the victims were largely marginalized women living on the fringes of society, early reports were frequently dismissed or delayed. Furthermore, the task force was completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data, bearing critical clues under mountains of unorganized paperwork. They were aggressively looking for a criminal genius who dropped cryptic clues, completely unable to comprehend a killer who possessed zero wit, zero charm, and acted purely on a mechanical, repetitive loop of primal violence. A mind game with Ted Bundy. In one of the most bizarre and cinematic twists in criminal history, the desperate investigators eventually turned to an imprisoned monster to catch the active one. Sitting on death row in Florida, the infamous Ted Bundy reached out to the Green River Task Force, offering his own twisted insights into the killer's mind. Bundy correctly predicted that the predator was returning to the grave sites to interact with the remains, advising the police to stake out newly discovered bodies. It was a surreal, deeply unsettling mind game, one historic serial killer profiling another from 1,000 miles away. Yet even with Bundy's accurate psychological roadmap, Ridgway remained completely invisible, continuing to paint trucks by day and hunt human beings by night without breaking a sweat. The typing of the polygraph. The most frustrating aspect of the Green River saga is that the police actually had their hands on Gary Ridgway very early in the timeline. In 1984, after a witness linked his truck to a missing woman, Ridgway was brought in for a formal interrogation. He sat across from detectives with a blank, unbothered expression, casually explaining away his presence in the area. To clear his name, he agreed to take a polygraph test. With the machine strapped to his chest, Ridgway lied smoothly about his horrific crimes, his heart rate remaining chillingly steady. He passed the lie detector test with flying colors. The detectives, trusting the faulty technology of the era, crossed his name off their main suspect list, releasing the monster back into the wild to kill again. The evolution of the clusters. As the years wore on, Ridgway's methods evolved from impulsive chaos into a highly organized, geometric system of body clustering. He stopped dumping bodies directly into the river, realizing the current moved them too unpredictably. Instead, he began grouping his victims in distinct secret clusters deep in the woods of King County and neighboring Oregon. He would lay them near old tires, fallen logs, or piles of garbage, using the natural debris of human neglect to mask the horror. By placing multiple bodies in close proximity, he minimized the time he spent scouting new locations, streamlining his horrific process. These clusters became silent, hidden monuments to his absolute dominance over the region, growing larger and more crowded as the decade drew to a close, the invisible decades. By the 1990s, the frantic media circus surrounding the Green River Killer began to fade away, and the massive task force was eventually dismantled down to a skeleton crew. The public assumed the monster had died, moved away, or been imprisoned for an unrelated crime. These invisible decades are perhaps the most haunting chapter of his story, proving that a serial predator doesn't always flame out in a spectacular showdown. Sometimes they just become a permanent, quiet fixture of the landscape. The microscopic trap of DNA. Gary Ridgway survived 20 years of police scrutiny because he outlasted the technology of his time, but science eventually caught up to his dark secrets. The quiet truck painter was arrested at his workplace, his face completely devoid of emotion as the handcuffs slapped around his wrists. The ghost of King County finally had a name, a face, and a DNA profile that no amount of rain could ever wash away. The confession of a ghost. When faced with the absolute certainty of the death penalty, Gary Ridgway finally traded his secrets for his life, opening the floodgates to a terrifying, monotone confession. In a sterile room, he casually admitted to more murders than any American killer before him, speaking of his victims as if they were nothing more than property he had acquired and discarded. He officially confessed to 48 murders, but chillingly admitted that the true number was likely closer to 70 or 80, his memory of the individual faces long blurred by the sheer, staggering volume of his crimes. He showed absolutely zero remorse, zero empathy, and zero dramatic flair. He was simply a human machine that had spent 20 years doing one horrific thing, leaving an eternal scar on the Pacific Northwest. If this dark, mysterious descent into America's most prolific predator kept your eyes completely locked until the very end, make sure to slam that subscribe button, smash the like icon, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Keep your doors locked, look closely at the mundane, and thanks for watching.